The global stage is, well, it's a whirlwind right now, isn't it?
It really is. Constant motion.
Yeah, one minute you're tracking these huge multi-billion-dollar trade deals set to reshape whole economies.
Uh-huh.
The next, it's this really intricate high-stakes dance of international mediation, trying to stop conflict.
Or start them sometimes.
True. And then, boom, suddenly a chilling escalation. Regional tensions flare up, pushing things closer to, well, unthinkable consequences.
This feels like everything's happening at once.
It does. It's a world in constant, often pretty dizzying motion. And if you look closely, right at the center of so many of these really crucial shifts, you find India.
Increasingly so.
So today we're taking a deep dive into India's increasingly pivotal and, let's be honest, undeniably complex role on this dynamic global stage.
Sounds good.
We'll be unraveling a curated collection of analyses and reports looking at India's burgeoning economic influence, its big potential as a critical peace broker in the grinding Ukraine war.
Which is still dragging on, tragically.
Yeah, exactly. And also the recent, frankly, rather alarming flare-up of tensions with its neighbor, Pakistan.
Yeah, that's definitely concerning.
Our mission here, as always, is to, extract the most important insights, connect the dots for you so you can hopefully see the larger tapestry of global affairs, maybe find some aha moments along the way.
And it's truly intriguing how these seemingly disparate threads, these complex trade agreements, then these blunt military threats, high-stakes diplomatic summits, they all kind of converge.
Right.
They really illustrate India's evolving position in the world order. We've gathered some detailed analyses of major trade negotiations, a pretty compelling argument for India's unique potential as a mediator in Ukraine.
Which we definitely need to unpack.
For sure. And also a stark report on regional security concerns that, interestingly, also critiques the broader international response, or maybe lack thereof.
It's a complex picture, no doubt.
Absolutely. But understanding one piece genuinely helps illuminate all the others. Every thread is interconnected.
Okay, let's kick off by unpacking India's incredible economic momentum. And let's start with what you can only really describe as a truly ambitious undertaking, the EU-India Free Trade Agreement, the FTA.
Right. Ambitious is the word.
So after a pretty significant hiatus, a long pause, negotiations for this massive deal impressively resumed back in June 2022.
Yep, they got back to the table.
Fast forward to, May 2025, just recently, and they just wrapped up the 11th round of talks in New Delhi.
11th round already.
And apparently several key chapters, including the ones on transparency, were successfully closed out. That seems like a remarkable pace for such a complex multilateral negotiation, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely, especially with the EU involving, 27 member states.
Right.
It's inherently complex.
Right.
And one striking aspect here, looking at the sources, is just the sheer commitment from both sides. It really comes through.
They seem serious this time.
Very serious.
Yeah.
The sources consistently emphasize that both the EU and India aren't just, hoping, but are resolutely aiming to finalize this whole agreement by the end of 2025.
Wow, that's soon. End of next year.
It is. And putting this into the broader context, it's about far more than just, shaving off a few tariff points here and there or boosting immediate market access.
It's bigger than that.
Much bigger. This strategic push is fundamentally about strengthening bilateral economic ties to a degree that really creates a robust, diversified economic framework for both sides.
Okay, makes sense.
So for the EU, it means securing access to one of the world's absolute fastest growing consumer markets, plus a critical production base.
And for India?
Well, for India, it's a very deliberate strategy. It's
Yeah.
about de-risking its global supply chains, diversifying away from maybe over-reliance on any single economic bloc.
Smart move.
Exactly. Making it a more resilient economic power, not just a growing one. It's really a proactive move to solidify a key partnership in what is, let's face it, a rapidly shifting global economy.
And this isn't just your standard goods-focused trade deal either, is it? Which is often what comes to mind when you hear FTA.
No, not at all. This is profoundly broader, much more comprehensive.
So beyond the main FTA itself, there are these separate but equally important pacts being rigorously discussed. What are those?
Right. So first, there's an investment protection agreement.
Crucial.
Absolutely crucial. It's all about ensuring non-discriminatory and secure investment environments, giving businesses on both sides the confidence, to commit capital expertise long-term.
Makes sense. Without that, investment stalls.
Exactly. And then there's a separate pact specifically on geographical indications, or GIs.
Ah, like champagne or Parma ham.
Precisely. For those maybe unfamiliar, this protects region-specific product names, ensuring, for example, that only tea from the Darjeeling region in India can actually be called Darjeeling tea.
Or Parmesan cheese really has to come from Italy.
Right, it prevents counterfeit products, protects that cultural heritage, and often significant economic value tied to those names.
Got it. So what about the main FTA provisions themselves? What are they aiming for?
Well, they're designed to be truly transformative. The core aims are to dramatically remove export barriers, making it significantly easier and cheaper for goods to flow between the EU and India. They also seek to open up services markets. This could create vast new opportunities for businesses in sectors like financial services, telecoms, IT areas, where both sides have strengths.
Public procurement, too. Government contracts.
But that's on the table as well, meaning greater transparency and access for both European and Indian companies bidding on government projects.
And intellectual property, always a big one.
Huge. Safeguarding IP is another crucial component, ensuring innovations, patents, creative works are properly protected.
And sustainability. I hear that mentioned a lot with EU deals.
Yes, absolutely. Both sides are reportedly deeply committed to sustainable development practices. They're looking to embed environmental and labor standards right into the core of the agreement.
So it's not just about money, it's about values, too.
Exactly. It really demonstrates a more forward-thinking, kind of holistic approach to trade in the 21st century. It's not just tariffs anymore.
The scale of what they already trade is pretty massive, though, right?
The numbers speak volumes. It provides a really substantial foundation to build on. In 2023 alone, EU-India trade in goods hit a staggering Euro 24 billion.
Wow.
And that's just goods. There was an additional 59.7 billion in services trade.
Huge numbers.
Huge. So the EU in particular views this agreement as potentially transformative, not just for the potential increase in trade volumes, but for the strategic depth it adds to their relationship with what is undeniably rapidly becoming a global economic powerhouse.
There are always hurdles, right? Especially with a deal this big. What are the sticking points?
Absolutely. No grand agreement like this comes without challenges. Our sources point to a few key areas. For instance, recent tensions over EU sanctions on Russia.
Ah, okay. How does that affect this?
Well, it directly affects India's complex trade dynamics. Given India's significant energy imports from Russia and its long-standing defense ties, it creates a really delicate diplomatic balancing act for India.
Trying to keep everyone happy.
Or at least manage the relationships. And then there are persistent concerns around intellectual property rules, particularly how they might impact global health access.
Especially pharmaceuticals. India is huge in generics.
Exactly. India plays a vital role as a global supplier of affordable generic drugs. The EU seeks robust IP protection, which is understandable from their perspective.
But India wants to ensure affordable access to medicines.
Precisely. So, resolving these complex, often politically charged issues, finding that balance will be absolutely key to meeting that ambitious end of 2025 deadline.
Okay, so while those EU talks are grinding on, India's actually finalized another major agreement, hasn't it, with the UK?
That's right. Building on that momentum.
Yeah.
The UK-India FTA.
This one was finalized back in May 2025, officially signed on July 24th, 2025, and now it's just waiting for ratification.
Done deal, pretty much. Just needs the final sign-offs.
And for the UK, this deal is incredibly significant. It marks its most substantial free trade agreement since Brexit, apparently.
It really is. It's a landmark moment for their post-EU global trade strategy. Shows their agility, perhaps, in forging new bilateral partnerships outside the bloc.
And the projected impact. Is it significant?
Analysts are already projecting it'll deliver a tangible boost. The expectation is an increase in bilateral trade by a remarkable $34 billion annually, starting from 2040.
$34 billion a year. That's substantial.
It really is. And when we put this into a wider perspective, this isn't just a win for the UK and India individually. It sets a powerful precedent.
How so?
Well, it demonstrates that comprehensive, high-value trade deals can be successfully negotiated and finalized outside of the larger, sometimes more cumbersome, existing blocs.
Kind of a proof of concept.
Exactly. It offers a potential model for other nations seeking new, tailored trade partnerships in this increasingly fragmented global economic landscape. It underscores a growing confidence in bilateral agreements as a more nimble way to achieve specific economic and strategic goals.
So let's get into the specifics. This UK-India deal sounds comprehensive. What does it cover?
It goes into impressive detail across multiple sectors. It impacts everything from, manufacturing to professional services.
Okay, like goods. What's the deal there?
Right. For goods, India is set to eliminate tariffs on a significant 90% of UK export lines over the next decade.
90%. Over 10 years. What kind of goods are we talking?
Think high-value British exports, luxury cars, premium Scotch whiskey, advanced machinery, electronics. They'll all become significantly cheaper and more competitive in that rapidly expanding Indian market.
Okay, and what about the other way? Indian goods coming to the UK.
The commitment there is even more immediate, actually, and quite impactful. The UK is eliminating tariffs on 99% of Indian goods right away, immediately.
99%. Immediately.
Yeah. That provides an instant competitive advantage for things like Indian textiles, pharmaceuticals, agricultural products, gives them immediate price superiority over many global competitors entering the UK.
And services. You mentioned that's important too.
Very important. We're talking enhanced access in crucial sectors like telecom, finance, professional services, creates vast new opportunities for service providers from both countries.
Plus things like IP protection and movement of people.
Yep. Strengthened IP protections, naturally. And critical provisions for temporary business mobility. That makes it considerably easier for professionals, consultants, tech workers, engineers to move between the two countries for work. Facilitates knowledge transfer, collaboration. It's all designed to streamline trade, investment, and that professional exchange. Really underpins a deeper economic partnership.
Now, you hear this phrase sometimes. Why is the UK deal often referred to as a floor for the ongoing EU negotiations? What does that mean?
Ah, right. That's a fascinating concept, actually. It speaks to how interconnected these big diplomatic efforts are.
Okay.
Essentially, it means that many of the core elements agreed upon and refined in the UK deal things like substantial tariff reductions, robust IP enhancements. They're highly likely to be mirrored or at least serve as a starting point in the larger EU agreement.
So the UK deal sets a baseline.
Exactly. Think of it as establishing a baseline, a kind of proven blueprint for certain aspects of the trade relationship with India. However,
There's a but.
there's a but. The EU version is widely expected to build upon this floor. It's likely to incorporate stronger environmental and labor standards.
Reflecting the EU's priorities.
Precisely. Reflecting the EU's unique regulatory priorities and its steadfast commitment to fostering a more sustainable, ethical, global trading system. That often goes beyond what a single bilateral partner might push for in initial talks. Highlights the distinct values and strategic objectives of different economic blocs.
So if we put these two massive deals, EU-India, UK-India side by side, what are the main similarities? What's the common ground?
Well, fundamentally, both are designed as comprehensive, modern trade pacts. They have strikingly similar overarching goals, tariffs, dramatically, significantly improve market access for both goods and services, and really turbocharge investment flows between India and these major economic blocs.
Deeper economic ties, growth, integration.
Exactly. They share that core ambition to deepen economic ties, foster robust growth, and integrate India more deeply into global supply chains.
But despite those clear commonalities, you mentioned the approaches are different. How so?
Yeah, one truly intriguing difference lies in the divergent approaches the EU and the UK took in just structuring these agreements.
Right, the EU's segmented approach.
Exactly. As you pointed out, the EU went for that segmented approach with those distinct separate pacts for investment protection and geographical indications.
Why do that?
It allows them to tackle really complex issues with tailored legal frameworks. And crucially, it reflects the diverse interests and regulatory nuances of its 27 member states. It's a multi-layered approach, maybe slower, but potentially more robust in the long run.
Okay. And the UK?
The UK contrasts sharply with its more integrated single agreement model. They packaged all these diverse elements, goods, services, investment, IP, digital trade into one comprehensive document.
So different styles, different needs.
Pretty much. It's a difference in negotiating style, maybe internal political dynamics, structural preference, reflecting their respective post-Brexit reality versus the EU's bloc-based reality.
Let's dive into a quick comparison then, based on the specifics from the sources. Status first.
Okay. Status. EU-India is ongoing, right? Active negotiations, conclusion expected end of 2025. UK-India signed July 2025.
Yeah.
Just awaiting ratification.
Scope.
Scope. EU is that multifaceted package FTA plus separate investment and GI deals. Big emphasis on sustainability. UK is a single comprehensive agreement covering everything goods, services, investment, IP, digital trade, all in one.
Tariff reductions, big difference there, right?
Yeah, quite different in specifics and timing. EU broad eliminations expected, but specifics are still being hammered out. UK-India eliminates tariffs on 90% of UK goods over 10 years. The UK eliminates tariffs on 99% of Indian goods immediately.
That immediate cut for Indian goods is significant.
Very. Instant competitive boost.
Services and investment.
EU aims to broadly open markets in services and procurement. The separate investment pact focuses meticulously on non-discrimination, dispute resolution vital for 27 members. UK provides enhanced access in key sectors like telecom, finance, professional services, and notably allows up to 74% UK ownership in Indian insurance and banking.
That 74% figure sounds important. Why that number?
It often represents a strategic threshold. It can grant UK firms a controlling stake or at least effective management control. That's crucial for influencing strategy, injecting capital, bringing in global practices directly into India's fast-growing financial sector. Could really reshape things there.
Okay. IP and GIs.
EU promises strong GI protections, IP commitments beyond current WTO standards, setting a high bar. UK also has enhanced patent protections, GI extensions for UK products, covers copyrights, trade secrets comprehensively.
Any other key areas that stand out?
Yeah, the EU discussions notably include strong provisions on sustainable development, cross-border data flows, potentially strict environmental and labor standards reflecting as broader regulatory goals. The UK deal, on the other hand, puts a very strong emphasis on digital trade, explicitly stating no forced data localization.
That's a big deal for tech companies.
Huge. Plus, the UK deal includes provisions for streamlined business mobility and enhanced innovation cooperation.
What about the overall economic impact projections?
Well, the EU-India FTA is expected to reinforce those already strong trade ties, building on that 124B goods and 59.7B services figure from 2023. The UK-India FTA, as we said, is projected to boost bilateral trade by $34 billion annually from 2040, making it the UK's most significant post-Brexit FTA.
And finally, challenges or key differences in a nutshell.
Okay, EU deal. Inherently more complex, aligning 27 members, potential ongoing issues with pharma IP, geopolitical sanctions impact, UK deal. Faster negotiation, being bilateral. Demonstrates agility, serves as a benchmark for the EU deal, but as we noted, comparatively less emphasis on green and social standards.
Really highlights the nuances, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Shows the distinct strategies and priority of these global players in dealing with a rising India.
Okay, let's shift gears now, moving from the boardrooms and trade pacts to the battlefields and diplomatic front lines. Let's turn our attention to India's pivotal, yet maybe often understated, role in the protracted conflict in Ukraine.
Right. A very different sphere, but just as important.
For over 2 years now, the Russia-Ukraine war has just been this grinding reality, hasn't it? Marked by a brutal stalemate.
Feels like forever.
Yeah. We've seen failed ceasefires, a tragic mounting casualty count, and this West-Russia divide that, frankly, feels even deeper, more entrenched than the Cold War itself.
It's a really bleak picture.
It is. A tragic, seemingly intractable situation.
And when you connect this to the broader geopolitical landscape, it becomes really clear why attempts at mediation have largely stalled. They've hit a wall, leaving a significant void.
Who's tried?
Well, our sources specifically point out that former U.S. President Donald Trump, for all his talk, has spent the last 6 months trying and apparently failing to broker peace. China's diplomatic efforts, often dismissed by the West as inherently pro-Moscow, which limits their perceived neutrality fairly or unfairly.
Right.
Europe is deeply entrenched in sanctions against Russia, which, while economically impactful, also constrain their role as a truly impartial arbiter.
Can't mediate if you're seen as taking a side.
Exactly, and the United Nations. Unfortunately, largely paralyzed by those fundamental geopolitical divisions among its permanent Security Council members. Veto power complicates everything.
So a critical vacuum.
Precisely. So in such an international impasse, the crucial question becomes, who, if anyone, can realistically break this agonizing stalemate?
And this is where the narrative really pivots, and it gets compelling, right? Because our sources highlight that amidst this global deadlock, there remains only one major power with both genuine credibility in Kyiv and deep established warmth in Moscow, and that's India.
It's an almost unique position.
Take a moment to consider that. It's a singular, profoundly powerful diplomatic position on the global stage right now.
Indeed. And what's truly remarkable here is the depth of that Russia-India friendship. It's fundamentally unlike any other among the big powers.
How so?
It's built not just on formal trade agreements or military treaties, but on decades of historical trust, consistent defense cooperation, a genuine warmth that's characterized their relationship really since the Cold War era.
A long history there.
A very long history. Moscow listens to New Delhi in a way it simply doesn't listen to Washington or Brussels or even Beijing. Because of this unique historical bond and India's steadfast stance on, strategic autonomy.
And Kyiv, how do they see India?
Well, conversely, even Kyiv, despite its deep ties to the West and its understandable wariness of external influence in its sovereign affairs, still sees India as a non-threatening voice from the global South.
Okay.
A nation that understands the complexities of maintaining strategic independence. This dual acceptance, this bridge-building capacity.
Right.
It's virtually unmatched by any other major global actor right now.
And yet, despite this truly unique and powerful leverage, India's current position has been, well, one source describes it as reduced to a safe but empty refrain: we support peace.
Ouch.
Yeah, nice words. No plan, no specifics, no moves. The stark reality, the source suggests, is that India's singular geopolitical advantage in this critical conflict is, right now, being squandered.
A missed opportunity.
More than that, potentially. A moment-by-moment erosion of potential influence with tangible costs.
So if India truly aspires to act like an emerging superpower, with the influence and global responsibility that comes with that, our source lays out a clear, actionable playbook.
Okay, what does it suggest?
These aren't vague suggestions. They're concrete, strategic proposals for how India could move from just rhetoric to decisive action.
Like what?
Okay, first, India should actively push Ukraine toward a security framework outside NATO that still definitively guarantees its sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Outside NATO. That's interesting.
It is, because, notably, it's a specific security architecture that even former President Trump, for all his efforts, hasn't specifically pressed for. It offers a potential path to Ukrainian security that might be more palatable to Moscow, addressing some core Russian fears while still respecting Ukrainian independence.
Okay, what else?
Second, given its unparalleled relationship, India has the unique ability to directly work Moscow toward a ceasefire tied to phased security guarantees. The source explicitly emphasizes this is a diplomatic space only India can credibly open.
Leveraging that trust.
Exactly. Leveraging its deep, long-standing trust with Russia to facilitate what others simply cannot. This could involve complex talks around troop withdrawals, demilitarized zones, verifiable security assurances for both sides.
Complex, but maybe possible for India? Third point.
Third, India could actively form a coalition of neutral middle powers. Think nations like Brazil, South Africa, the ASEAN nations.
A neutral bloc?
Sort of. Such a bloc, acting in concert, unified voice, would carry significant moral and diplomatic weight in both the Western and Russian camps, provide a broader, more balanced, less partisan diplomatic force that could bridge divides.
Makes sense. And finally,
India should concretely table its own peace framework, informed by actionable proposals. Our source cites something called Formula for Peace in Ukraine as an example of the kind of detailed, specific plan that could be put forward.
so moving from observer to architect.
Precisely. Demonstrating genuine leadership, not just supporting peace in principle.
So what's the urgent implication here? Why the rush?
The source argues pretty powerfully that every week India hesitates, the cost rises. Meaning, it's not just about diplomatic standing. It's about the tangible consequences of this prolonged conflict for global stability, for supply chains, for India's own economic and strategic interests. The stakes are getting higher, and the window for decisive action might be closing.
And speaking of rising costs and geopolitical signals, our sources reveal a fascinating detail that connects economic pressure directly to this diplomatic calculation.
Ah, yes. Donald Trump's sudden 25% tariff threat on Indian exports.
Right. Seems to come out of nowhere.
Well, when we connect this to the broader geopolitical picture, the source strongly suggests this looks far less like a straightforward trade policy issue.
Just about tariffs and goods.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And much more like, quote, a shot across the bow.
A warning shot.
A clear, deliberate sign of frustration from Washington, according to this analysis. The perception, the source says, is that New Delhi is ducking the hard work of peacemaking.
Wow. So using trade as a lever for diplomacy.
It certainly raises that critical question about the profound interconnectedness of global affairs. how directly intertwined are economic pressures and geopolitical expectations on the global stage.
Is this tariff threat mainly a strategic lever to prod India into a more active mediation role? Or just trade protectionism? Or
Like,
both?
it forces us to consider that economic policy can absolutely be a powerful, direct tool of foreign policy sometimes, signaling displeasure, pushing for specific geopolitical outcomes from key partners. It's fascinating and maybe a bit worrying.
Okay, let's pivot again. From high-stakes diplomacy in Ukraine to the region where the global landscape becomes, well, intensely localized and deeply concerning, South Asia.
Right, back closer to home for India.
Recent reports indicate Pakistan's army chief, General Syed Asim Munir, made headlines with some incredibly provocative statements. And where he made them is key, during a black-tie dinner event in Tampa, Florida.
Tampa, Florida. That's
Right.
unexpected.
Very. What's truly surprising, almost shocking, is the specific venue and context. It was hosted by a prominent Pakistani-American businessman, Adnan Assad, at the Grand Hyatt, and it deliberately coincided with the retirement ceremony of the U.S. CNTCOM commander, General Michael Kurilla.
Okay, so high-level U.S. military context.
Exactly. This was part of Munir's second visit to the U.S. in recent months, where he also held meetings with various U.S. military officials. The choice of venue, the timing, it undoubtedly gave these statements an added, quite disturbing layer of significance.
Indeed. And what's truly unsettling here are the stark, frankly chilling remarks attributed to General Munir from that event. He reportedly stated, and I'm quoting here, "We are a nuclear nation. If we think we're going down, we'll take half the world down with us."
Good grief. It's blunt.
Extremely blunt. And this comment wasn't made in a vacuum. It was explicitly framed within Pakistan's perception of existential threats, with India being the heavily implied primary adversary.
Made on U.S. soil, at a U.S. military-linked event.
Precisely. It immediately raises profound questions about the immense responsibility that comes with possessing nuclear capabilities and the terrifying implications of that kind of rhetoric on the international stage. It's a stark, almost visceral reminder of the immense destructive power at play in that volatile region.
But he didn't stop there, did he? The threats became even more specific and deeply provocative.
No, he didn't. Munir reportedly warned that any aggression against Pakistan would likely begin from India's east, where they have located their most valuable resources, and then move westward.
That's not vague. That's a specific directional warning, targeting India's perceived strategic vulnerability.
Yes. And perhaps most jarringly, he directly addressed the critical Indus Waters Treaty.
The water sharing agreement, always sensitive.
Hugely sensitive.
Yeah.
A lifeline for both nations. He reportedly threatened to destroy any dams India constructs that could affect water flow to Pakistan.
Destroy dams. Seriously.
He remarked, and this is a direct quote from our source, "We will wait for India to build a dam, and when it does, we will destroy it with 10 missiles.
10 missiles.
And further asserted, the Indus River is not the Indians' family property. We have no shortage of missiles, alhamdulillah, praise be to God.
Wow. Now the source notes the missiles could be conventional.
Right, they could be. But the nuclear context established earlier in his speech, combined with Pakistan's long-standing doctrine of potential first use in response to perceived conventional threats. It makes this an incredibly loaded and dangerous statement.
The implication is clear.
Very clear. Pakistan is willing to escalate to an extreme degree over water, a resource already under immense strain in the region.
Did he say anything else?
He also seized the opportunity to strongly criticize India's handling of recent conflicts. He mentioned what he termed the 4-day war, likely referring to the intense cross-border skirmishes in February 2019 after the Pulwama attack and the Pahalgam terrorist attack, a significant attack on civilians in Jammu and Kashmir in 2024. He urged India to accept their losses.
And that metaphor, the Mercedes and the dump truck.
Ah, yes. A truly chilling comparison. He likened India to a shining Mercedes on a highway and Pakistan to a dump truck full of gravel. Suggesting Pakistan was willing to resort to messy, devastating responses with catastrophic consequences, even if it meant a destructive outcome for everyone involved. It paints a stark picture of Pakistan's perceived resolve and its asymmetric warfare doctrine.
Did he mention capabilities?
He further highlighted Pakistan's substantial military capabilities, its perceived religious destiny, and its unique ability, in his view, to balance ties with both the U.S. and China, effectively positioning Pakistan as a significant, maybe even defiant player on multiple global fronts.
How were these remarks received? Predictably, perhaps?
Predictably, yes. They drew significant and immediate criticism in India from political figures across the spectrum. People like Shiv Sena's Priyanka Chaturvedi, various BJP spokespersons,
Condemning them.
widely condemning the comments as deeply provocative and highlighting growing concerns about renewed military ties between the U.S. and Pakistan in light of such rhetoric.
And in Pakistan.
Meanwhile, Pakistani media and social media users largely portrayed Munir's speech positively. Many expressed pride in the bold nuclear warnings issued on U.S. soil, which, aligns with Pakistan's long-standing nuclear posture of escalation to deter India's conventional military superiority.
And any official denial from Pakistan's military or Munir.
As of August 10, 2025, according to the source, there has been no official denial, which fits a broader pattern of heightened rhetoric amid ongoing India-Pakistan tensions over Kashmir, water resources, border incidents. In this context, the silence from Islamabad itself becomes part of the message, doesn't it? Suggests tacit endorsement.
Okay, so this raises a crucial, maybe unsettling question. Is this kind of rhetoric new, or is it part of something deeper, more ingrained in Pakistan's strategic thinking?
That's exactly the question the source explores. It highlights a standing policy in Pakistan known as Gazwa-E-Hind.
Gazwa-E-Hind, what does that translate to?
It translates roughly to the conquest of India.
Conquest of India.
Yes. And what's truly compelling here is how it's presented. Not as some hypothetical scenario or merely a reactive stance to current events or specific provocations. Instead, the source describes it as a well-established component of Pakistan's military and ideological framework. This doctrine, rooted in certain historical and religious narratives within influential segments of Pakistan's establishment, describes a future, supposedly divinely ordained, military victory over India.
So it implies a goal far beyond just deterrence or defense.
Exactly. It embeds a proactive, almost expansionist vision into some core strategic thought processes and national narratives within parts of the Pakistani state.
This is where it gets truly unsettling, isn't it? The source emphasizes that Gazwa-E-Hind is not rooted in responses to specific Indian provocations. It's not just defensive.
No. The source stresses it has been a long-standing, explicit objective within certain powerful circles, the military establishment, associated religious political groups.
And the core tenet is?
The military subjugation of India, often articulated in deeply religious and territorial terms, which makes it far more than just a military doctrine. It's profoundly embedded in the national mindset of some powerful segments of Pakistan's establishment.
Suggesting a fundamental, proactive, aggressive posture towards India, regardless of India's own actions or desires.
That's the implication. When you connect this to the broader geopolitical picture, the consequences are stark. For Pakistan's army and those who adhere to this doctrine, the ultimate goal isn't merely deterrence against India's conventional superiority, but potentially the total military conquest of India.
Which informs their policies.
This mindset, regardless of India's expressed desire for peaceful coexistence, arguably informs Pakistan's consistent policies on contentious issues like Kashmir, its ongoing military buildup along the eastern border, and crucially, its nuclear doctrine, that famous willingness for potential first use.
So it frames these actions not as reactions, but as deliberate steps towards a long-term objective.
That's the argument presented. Steps towards a long-term, religiously and ideologically informed objective. It's a deeply concerning perspective.
Now let's pivot to a powerful critique presented by our source, what it explicitly calls the hypocrisy of U.S. inaction.
Right. This is a strong claim.
The source asks us to imagine, just for a moment, a hypothetical scenario. What if Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was invited to speak on U.S. soil and openly threatened the total annihilation of Israel? What would the U.S. response be?
Immediate and widespread outrage, surely. Condemnation, Iran labeled a rogue state, possibly new sanctions, diplomatic isolation.
That would be the expected and arguably justified reaction from Washington, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is the core of the source's critique. In this very real case, the U.S. provided Pakistan a prominent platform to make strikingly similar threats against India.
India being a nuclear power itself and a close U.S. strategic ally in the Indo-Pacific.
Exactly. And what's truly remarkable, the source notes, is the lack of immediate or public condemnation from the U.S. Instead, the U.S. appears to prefer engaging in, quote, diplomatic niceties, seemingly downplaying the significance and gravity of General Munir's remarks.
Which raises that critical question for observers. Why the perceived double standard? Why is one set of existential threats met with international outrage, while another, arguably just as serious given the nuclear context, is met with apparent silence and continued engagement?
So what does this perceived double standard mean for U.S. credibility, its alliances, particularly with democratic partners like India?
Well, the source asserts pretty bluntly that this selective condemnation is rooted in political convenience,
Meaning,
meaning Pakistan is undeniably seen by Washington as a strategic ally in the critical global war on terror and a key player in the region, particularly as a potential stabilizing force for Afghanistan.
so strategic priorities override condemning the rhetoric.
The U.S. has historically prioritized its complex relationship with Pakistan, often appearing to sideline concerns about Pakistan's aggressive rhetoric toward India. It's perhaps a pragmatic choice from Washington's perspective, but one with significant and potentially concerning implications for its democratic partners in the region.
What's the core argument the source makes about this?
What's truly compelling is the source's core argument. The undeniable truth, it claims, that Washington cannot escape is that Pakistan and Iran are not singing two different songs when it comes to regional threats. They are, in essence, singing the same one.
How so?
Both countries have been actively engaging in rhetoric and, at times, policy designed to destabilize their respective neighbors. The U.S. may be quick to label Iran's aggression against Israel as a serious direct threat to global security. But when it comes to Pakistan's strikingly similar rhetoric against India, Washington remains notably passive, maintaining a stance of apparent neutrality despite the stark parallels in the nature and gravity of the threats.
Creating a perceived imbalance in how the U.S. applies its principles.
That's the perception highlighted.
So this perceived double standard begs a critical question. What are the concrete long-term consequences for regional stability, for the U.S.'s own strategic interests?
Well, India, a fellow democratic ally, is increasingly forced to question the U.S.'s true stance on these regional security issues and the reliability of its partnerships. That's one consequence.
Undermining trust.
Potentially. And if Pakistan's military establishment feels it can continue threatening its neighbors with impunity, especially with nuclear undertones and that explicit doctrine of Gazwa-E-Hind in the background, the risk of escalating tensions and potentially a catastrophic conflict only grows.
It could inadvertently validate nuclear saber-rattling.
Exactly. It could send a dangerous signal globally about the consequences, or lack thereof, for provocative rhetoric, potentially undermining the very non-proliferation norms Washington claims to uphold. It certainly complicates efforts to build a truly stable and secure Indo-Pacific.
Okay, let's zoom back out now to the highest levels of the global stage. Amidst all these intricate trade talks and deeply concerning regional tensions we've just discussed, we're seeing the announcement of a direct in-person meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Right. A major development.
This highly anticipated summit is scheduled for August 15th, 2025, taking place in Alaska. And its stated aim is to discuss potential pathways to resolving the conflict in Ukraine.
Headline grabbing, for sure. Could dramatically shift dynamics.
This comes against the immediate backdrop of, well, Russia's continued aggression in Ukraine, Ukraine's steadfast and incredibly costly resistance, and those broader international efforts that, as we discussed earlier, have largely failed to broker peace.
It's a high-stakes moment for global diplomacy, filled with both potential and, frankly, peril.
One has to immediately wonder, don't you, is direct dialogue always a good thing, regardless of the specific context or the actors involved? Or does this unique situation, the history between these leaders, the absence of key parties, does that fundamentally alter the calculation?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Proponents of this meeting argue pretty vehemently that direct dialogue between leaders of nuclear-armed superpowers is actually a fundamental cornerstone of stable international relations, especially in times of deep conflict like this.
The argument being
That face-to-face meetings allow for clearer, more nuanced communication. You can interpret subtle body language, maybe build some crucial informal rapport that you just can't replicate through Zoom calls or even trusted intermediaries. It's about that human connection at the highest level of power.
Are there historical examples?
They often point to historical precedents, like the 1986 Reykjavik summit between Reagan and Gorbachev.
Right, the one that didn't seal a deal immediately.
Exactly. But it famously paved the way for future groundbreaking arms control agreements. By fostering mutual understanding, a personal connection that broke through ideological barriers. Even Trump's previous meetings with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, despite significant criticism, often controversial optics are credited by some with helping de-escalate acute tensions on the Korean peninsula. pulling back from the brink of a potentially disastrous conflict.
So the argument is in Ukraine, where nuclear saber-rattling is a terrifying reality.
A personal encounter, proponents argue, could critically clarify red lines, help prevent accidental clashes or dangerous miscalculations, which remains a paramount global concern. The very act of talking, they believe, reduces the risk of war.
And what's compelling for proponents here is that fundamental principle. Talking is always, generally, preferable to not talking, especially when human lives are at stake on such a massive scale.
Just opening the door is important.
Exactly. The very act of holding this summit, they argue, signals a willingness from both sides to engage, which could, theoretically, restart those stalled negotiations that have proven so elusive.
Even if Putin has used ceasefire strategically before.
Right. Well, it's true, Putin has reportedly used past ceasefire proposals to buy time and regroup. Trump's direct involvement might shift the dynamics significantly. He could introduce U.S. leverage, maybe sanctions relief, specific security guarantees for Russia's borders in exchange for concrete Russian concessions on Ukrainian territory or sovereignty.
Even small steps would be something.
Absolutely. Even if comprehensive peace remains elusive, even incremental progress, like establishing humanitarian corridors, facilitating prisoner swaps, would offer tangible, immediate benefits to civilians suffering on the ground.
What about the symbolic value, the location in Alaska?
Well, the symbolic value for broader global stability can't be overlooked. Hosting it in Alaska, neutral U.S. territory, but with those historical ties to Russia, remember the Alaska Purchase.
Right.
It underscores a pragmatic approach over an overtly confrontational one. This kind of direct, high-level engagement in the eyes of its supporters could reassure both allies and adversaries that the world's superpowers are actively managing their rivalry responsibly, not letting tensions spiral out of control.
And in a multipolar world, China's watching.
China's watching every move very closely for signals about global power dynamics. Such meetings also help prevent dangerous power vacuums that other actors might be tempted to exploit, potentially leading to further instability elsewhere. It sends a message of managed competition, perhaps.
Okay, but conversely, critics of this summit argue, with equally strong conviction, that this meeting might not be a good thing at all, could even be detrimental. What's their main concern?
Their primary concern is that meeting bilaterally just Trump and Putin, without Ukrainian President Zelensky present at the table, risks signaling to the world that major powers can simply carve up smaller nations' fates without their consent or input.
Like Yalta in 1945.
Exactly. They argue it disturbingly harks back to problematic historical precedents like the Yalta Conference, which divided Europe into spheres of influence, deciding the fate of nations without full sovereign input from the affected countries.
How are Ukrainians reacting?
Ukrainians have already expressed profound dismay at the prospect, viewing it as a potential slow defeat, where concessions like maybe ceding occupied territories in Donbass or Crimea might be floated without their consent or even presence at the negotiating table.
Portraying Ukraine as a pawn.
This format, critics contend, risks portraying Ukraine as a mere pawn in a larger great power game, rather than a sovereign actor whose very future and existence is directly at stake.
What about the impact on alliances? Or emboldening other aggressors?
That's another critical question for those who oppose the meeting. Could it actually harm existing alliances? Could it inadvertently embolden other aggressors around the globe?
Trump's history with Putin plays into this.
Absolutely. Trump's past history, including instances of public praise that perceived deference at the 2018 Helsinki summit. It raises significant concerns among allies about potentially imbalanced negotiations this time around.
What are they afraid might happen?
Critics fear it could lead to an unfavorable land swap deal for Ukraine, or maybe the dilution of critical sanctions against Russia, which have been a cornerstone of Western pressure.
Which could erode NATO unity.
Exactly. Such outcomes could, in turn, deeply erode NATO unity and the resolve of the European Union, potentially emboldening other aggressive actors elsewhere, maybe China, regarding Taiwan, or Iran in the Middle East.
How are European leaders reacting?
Many European leaders, who are meeting separately to coordinate their own strategies, have voiced deep skepticism, viewing this as a purely U.S.-Russia bilateral affair that dangerously sidelines broader EU interests and collective security efforts. The concern is that a perceived weakening of Western resolve or a fragmented approach could have far-reaching negative consequences beyond Ukraine itself, setting dangerous precedents for international law and sovereignty.
And finally, critics point to opportunity costs and domestic divisions.
Yes, significant opportunity costs. Time and diplomatic resources spent on a singular, high-profile summit like this can divert crucial attention and energy from multilateral forums. The UN, the G7, where accountability is arguably higher, more broadly distributed, fostering a more collective approach.
And domestically, in the U.S.?
Domestically, particularly in the U.S., such a meeting could further polarize public opinion, especially if no tangible or immediately positive outcome emerges, or if the terms appear to concede too much. Some might view it as a failure before it even starts.
If no deal emerges, or if a bad deal results.
If no meaningful deal emerges, it might simply harden existing positions, prolong the conflict. And even worse, if a bad or perceived weak deal results, it could ultimately lead to extended suffering rather than genuinely ending it, undermining the credibility of future diplomatic efforts.
How does this fit into diplomatic theory, realism versus liberalism?
Good question. The debate around this meeting vividly highlights that classic tension between realism, which often favors direct leader-to-leader talks for power balancing, managing great power competition.
Like Kissinger's approach.
Exactly. Sees it as potentially effective for short-term de-escalation.
Yeah.
Allows direct negotiation between the strongest actors. Liberalism, on the other hand, puts stronger emphasis on institutions, international law, shared norms. Argues that bypassing these multilateral mechanisms can weaken the long-term pursuit of justice, accountability, collective security.
And this meeting leans?
This meeting clearly leans realist in its approach, prioritizing direct engagement over multilateral frameworks. And historical outcomes from such high-stakes bilateral summits are notoriously mixed, aren't they?
True. Nixon in Moscow worked. Obama's reset didn't really.
Right. Nixon's 1972 Moscow summit is often cited as successfully thawing U.S.-Soviet relations. But Obama's attempts at a reset ultimately faltered, especially after the Crimea annexation. Shows direct talks aren't a panacea. Limited results if underlying intentions diverge.
What about the specific risks versus rewards here, in the Ukraine context?
Well, the Ukraine war, now entering its third brutal year, absolutely demands innovative, determined approaches to peace. No question. However, Putin's well-established goals, territorial gains, weakening NATO fundamentally clash with U.S. and Ukrainian aims of upholding sovereignty and international law.
So the goodness of the meeting depends on intent.
All else equal, yes. It hinges entirely on the genuine intent behind it. If it's a sincere outreach to advance a just, lasting peace, then it serves a vital purpose. But if it's merely performative, political posturing, just buying time, then it risks delaying accountability, prolonging the conflict, legitimizing aggression.
Public reaction reflects that divide.
Vividly. You see it on social media, like X. Some expressing pro-peace optimism, others voicing deep fears of betrayal or cynical manipulation, mirroring those broader global splits.
So how can we assess this objectively? What are the metrics for good?
Good question. To assess objectively, we should probably measure good by concrete, tangible outcomes, like a verifiable reduction in violence, the upholding of international norms of sovereignty, and critically, the inclusion of all relevant stakeholders in any lasting solution.
And excluding Ukraine tilts against that.
Clearly. Excluding Ukraine from these direct talks tilts against a morally sound and sustainable outcome. However,
A potential upside.
if this meeting, against the odds maybe, unexpectedly catalyzes broader, more inclusive talks that genuinely lead to a breakthrough, moving past the current intractable stalemate, then it could ultimately be a net positive.
And the broader implications beyond Ukraine.
They extend far beyond Ukraine, touching global energy markets, the ongoing refugee and migration crises, and that terrifying prospect of nuclear proliferation, particularly in other volatile regions.
Does the source offer a summary assessment? A kind of balanced scorecard?
Yes, it does. Looking at a summary assessment from its comparative table, we see this balanced but cautious outlook for short-term stability. High potential for positive impact, as dialogue can reduce flashpoints, but a medium risk of false hopes or short-lived ceasefires. So net positive if genuine de-escalation occurs.
Okay. Long-term peace.
Long-term peace. Potential for breakthroughs rated as medium, but risk of failure remains significant given the history of Russian violations, its strategic objectives. Net assessment, neutral to cautious, highly dependent on rigorous enforcement and a fundamental shift in calculus.
Moral impact.
Norms, moral normative impact. Low potential for the meeting itself to overtly normalize aggression, but a high risk of undermining Ukrainian sovereignty by their exclusion, resulting in a net negative without direct, meaningful Ukrainian input and agency.
And finally, impact on global alliances.
Global alliances. Medium potential for the U.S. to demonstrate leadership in crisis management, but a low to medium risk of eroding trust within key alliances like NATO and the EU, especially if allies feel sidelined. Net assessment, neutral to potentially negative, depends heavily on how sensitively the U.S. manages these complex relationships and consults its partners. Hashtag outro.
So, after all that,
Yeah.
what does this all mean for you as you navigate and try to understand our incredibly complex, interconnected world?
It's a lot to take in.
It is. Today, we've taken a fascinating journey across India's rapidly expanding global influence. We started with the intricacies of its burgeoning trade negotiations with giants like the EU and the UK.
Big economic moves.
Then we moved to its pivotal, yet as our sources suggest, perhaps unfulfilled role as a potential peace mediator in the devastating Ukraine conflict.
The unique leverage.
Exactly. And finally, we explored that volatile regional security environment, marked by alarming nuclear rhetoric from Pakistan and that pointed critique of perceived U.S. neutrality, all within the larger diplomatic chess game being played out with the impending Trump-Putin summit in Alaska.
And it's truly compelling, isn't it, to observe how all these seemingly disparate threads are just inextricably linked. They form this comprehensive, dynamic web of global interactions.
Nothing happens in isolation.
Absolutely not. India's impressive economic growth, its pursuit of these ambitious trade deals, it directly fuels its geopolitical aspirations, its potential to become a true global leader, capable of exerting diplomatic influence.
But the challenges are real, too.
Simultaneously, yes, regional tensions, particularly with Pakistan, and broader global conflicts like Ukraine. They directly impact India's trade dynamics, its diplomatic standing, the strategic choices it has to make.
What's the key insight about India's position here?
Well, the profound insight isn't merely India's unique position between East and West. It's that its historical non-alignment now presents this unique opportunity for targeted, maybe non-Western, off-ramps to conflict.
Like that security framework outside NATO idea.
Exactly. Something that fundamentally addresses Moscow's core fears, perhaps, while still affirming Ukrainian sovereignty. It's a space few others can occupy.
So the critical question remains.
The critical question is whether India steps up as a decisive, proactive global actor in peacemaking and de-escalation, or whether it remains, perhaps understandably cautious, on the sidelines. That choice will profoundly shape not just its own future as an emerging superpower.
But the broader international order, too.
Indeed, the very balance of power in the 21st century.
Which brings us to a final thought. As global power dynamics continue to shift, with emerging nations like India taking on these larger and larger roles economically, diplomatically, security-wise, how might the very definition of superpower responsibility itself evolve?
Interesting question.
Will it remain primarily about traditional military might, economic clout, or will it expand to include a more proactive, maybe even unwavering imperative of global peacemaking and de-escalation, especially when the existing mechanisms, the old ways, seem to be failing?
A lot to think about there. What does leadership look like in this new era?
It's definitely a question worth pondering as we continue to watch these complex, interconnected relationships unfold on the world stage. Until next time.